I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
And welcome to Biased Reactions Bestiary 3, where we resume in our 6th round with the letter O.
O for possum.
O possum.
That's right.
Yes. So, let me go ahead and get that book up. Boop. Book
All right.
view.
There we go. So, let's talk about this possum. So, we've got not only a giant possum, which is a level 2 possum, that's pretty big for a possum. It can feign its death, because of course it's a possum.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you mess with it, when it seems to be dead, it will react to attack you. Can try to grab very small things with its tail when it's moving around, and it attacks you. It's a possum. But
and naturally, if you attack it or disturb it when it's pretending to be dead, then it gets an attack against you.
That's right. That's right. But then there's also the Kravgodon, which is a level 9 huge possum that loves to eat encraves. That's why it's a Kravgodon. And so it crushes chitin, and Khaleds tell about a Kravgodon with a tail, but the encraves chewed off the hair of the tail, and that's why they hate them and they eat them for dinner. So that's the possum. What about Ostavites? So Ostavites are this kind of weak fiend from the abyss. They're not demons. And they kind of have, some serious complexes. Because they are this weak little creature that kind of build shells of bone that are their bone chariots. That they hide inside of bone chariots that they build out of bodies. And they can scuttle away if you destroy their bone chariots.
And they don't really understand anatomy that well, so they just kind of build their own creative structures so they could look like a wide variety of things.
That's right. That's right. They absolutely do. And they've got these giant bone chariots that you fight them in the bone chariots, that you fight them out of the bone chariots. And they feel deeply inferior to creatures larger than themselves, but is overwhelmed by their visceral desire to harvest those creatures' bones to increase their status. So it's like these dueling facts about the Ostavites. Alright, what have we got next? The beginning and the ending, the Ouroboros. Level 21 giant ring of,
cool art.
Of snakes.
Snakes within snakes.
That's right. The mythological Ouroboros. So, the Ouroboros is rare. It has 500 hit points and 50 regeneration. But it's got some weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got unfathomable infinity. When you're within 100 feet of it, you're strained. Your comprehension is strained, and you become stupefied. And potentially stunned 3. And even more potentially stunned for a minute.
One thing that I find interesting here too is that usually once you get up into this level range, the creatures that you're fighting are pretty darn smart. But the Ouroboros has -4 int.
That's right. Some people think that it's mindless because it just is kind of, rolling around in a wheel, but it does have a crude intellect and can understand speech somehow with -4 int, which was very strange even on its own, though they have no way to speak. And they're very instinctive, and they just have a will to survive and defend themselves. They're not even evil, they're just, they're going to defend themselves, and they need to survive.
If you conjure, if it comes into the material plane, then it as it says up there, it often decides that the next part of the cycle of recreation to destruction that is needed is destruction.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
It's got so many stakes to make attacks of opportunity that it makes an attack of opportunity as a free action. When it takes slashing or piercing damage, or when it ends its devoured tail ability, blood gushes from its wound into a 15-foot cone, which deals acid damage and then coagulates into snakes, which creates extremely hazardous snake terrain.
I mean, that does seem pretty dangerous if the terrain is just described as poisonous snakes.
It rolls and flies around. It attacks you with an incalculable number of fangs. It spends most of its life eating its own tail. And it cannot have its regeneration suppressed ever if it's consuming itself. It is immune to a bunch of stuff. It can either end eating its own tail on purpose, or somebody can grapple it to try to tear its maw free to stop it from eating its own tail to get rid of that.
Yeah, and it might choose to end it on purpose if it wants to use its maw or tail attacks.
Yep, and given that it has improved grab and its only reaction is fast swallow, that is, if it uses its maw, you're going in. You're going in so quickly because it attacks you, then as a free action it grabs you, then as a reaction it swallows you. And when it is eating its own tail, it can do a very fast trample through the air called Flying Wheel, which is pretty scary. And then its regenerative blood is basically a poison, but that also gives you regeneration. But it makes you very slow and clumsy. And
That's
then
interesting.
Eventually turns you, or it's a curse also. It eventually turns you into a mass of writhing snakes for an unlimited amount of time.
You can be part of the Ouroboros.
That's right. Alchemists sometimes also want to, get some Ouroboros blood. Maybe think they can use it to make that 20th level elixir of life. But, there's usually immense drawbacks. You could use them instead of diamonds in a resurrect ritual. Maybe. But, usually...
Hopefully you didn't need an additional resurrect ritual from the process of acquiring the Ouroboros blood.
Yeah, and usually there are snake-related mutations, or your body degenerates into clusters of snakes, so yay! Alright, and in case you thought Ouroboros would be the last O in the alphabet,
it is not.
It's not, because there's Ob with a W.
Yes, from the shadow plane.
Ancient shadow plane beings that they kind of worship the demigods known as Forsaken, but they kind of are also scamming and are like, yeah, we'll get this to the Forsaken. Oh, I'm going to keep this worship to myself. I am an Ob. So they are...
Well, the prophets have a portion of the Forsaken's power.
That's right. But the Obs in general are ambassadors of the Forsaken, and the prophets are the ones who actually have a connection, but they're not always actually forthright about it.
And if you're curious about, so what are the Forsaken anyway, there's a whole giant sidebar here that talks about...
That's right.
Several of the Forsaken.
Yep. Prophets you would think are like helping these lost Forsaken demigods, but they mostly are, a lot of them are just like, they just want their own deal. So Obs are, as you can see, like these sort of flying, like partial shadowy bone things that can attack you with cold flame, burning cold. They've got all sorts of nasty shadow plane shifting, shadow blast, shadow walk,
associated with there. That does cold damage.
They'll
and also
steal your
washes
light.
out your light, both the color of your body and also gives you light blindness.
For unlimited duration. Even the regular level 6 Ob can do that. And an Ob Prophet can use a special ability from their Forsaken. They can do a Fusillade of Burning Cold. They have Clutching Cold, where they can create binding ice crystals to immobilize you with their attacks.
And they can shadow walk in a single round.
Yeah, I mean, why not? They like to. They enjoy it.
They also have at-will mind reading.
Yep. They want to read your mind, and they can dominate you. They've got more shadow blasts. They've got all sorts of nasty tricks. Plus, you can worship an prophet, yay!
Not necessarily the best idea, but you could.
Yeah, you get Fed to Pain, Shadow Walk, and any spell of the Forsaken Patron at its minimum level. And if this doesn't add 3 spells to the Divine list, then we've got you a mind reading from that at-will mind reading just for you. And hey, now you know what the Obes do, since we saw earlier that if anyone can try to cast the Obe summoning ritual if they learn it, that is, if you're not a Caligny caller, well, the Obe will automatically think that you're unworthy and try to kill you.
Yep. So that's how they work.
Yeah.
What about the beginning of P with PAA?
Yes, Paradar saw the pangolin. It was like, you cannot be first, pangolin. I have named myself Paradar, and so I have 2 A's.
Are Paaradars new, and their name became Paaradar because we needed something that, like,
they are new,
go pangolin?
And it almost certainly was like, well, there's a 2-page Obe, but we need something that is either after pangolin and before penangolin, or after or before pangolin.
So that means before pangolin, because pangolin and penangolin are like
Penangalangalangalin.
Should be part of a tongue twister somehow.
So Paradar are basically monks who are dissatisfied with their humanoid form and are like, aha, I can find a shortcut to steal the power of other creatures. And so they do it, but unfortunately, it kind of tests the limits of both their physical body and their soul, their spiritual essence. So they have to stay in constant discipline or they will go out of control. And the rituals are pretty evil, but you need like a captive sapient creature that you are basically drawing the soul out of. Over intense rituals, and you're transforming your own ki. It's just not great, but if you do, you basically kind of mess around with your own chakras. In the lower chakras, you stop after the root, sacral, and navel chakras, because if you go further, you will probably lose your emotions and intellect entirely and start going into like that kind of thought and mental essences. And the original Paradis succumbed to it because he wanted to unlock all the chakras.
Yep.
So this is a lesson to you if you're a Paradar not to do that. And so this one is a Manticore Paradar, but you can do it with kind of any creature you want if you're an evil ritualistic Paradar. It's like an evil monk who can kind of do a sharp riposte on people who try to attack while raising up defenses. Shoot out Manticore spikes because it's a Manticore Paradar. Got Flurry of Blows, kind of a limited flight from the wings. And key spells,
but they take negative damage every time they use one.
Because their key is unnaturally disrupted by themselves.
Yes. Yep. They have no one to blame but themselves for that.
Or Paradis. They can blame him.
Yes.
Alright,
but they shouldn't blame pangolins, because
they could blame pangolins.
Oh, so cute.
Couldn't they blame pangolins?
I mean, they could.
Why couldn't they blame pangolins?
They're evil. They can blame whoever
they can blame anyone. They're lawful evil.
Yep.
So pangolins, giant pangolins, are kind of solitary creatures that just kind of eat insects and vermin. Even though they are large and are actually could kill an ogre in a one-on-one.
A pangolin Paradar. A pangolin Paradar would be
It seems like Paradars
are more like
go after sapient creatures.
Yeah,
they might need it.
Dragons, Minotaur, and Aeon.
So they might not be able to, but they could go after a pangolin beastkin maybe. I'm not sure if a Leshy Paradar would work because Leshies may not actually have spiritual essence in the same way as other creatures. Pando Leshy. You could definitely have the pangolin Leshy from the Art of Lost Omen's Ancestry Guide.
Yeah.
So a giant pangolin has musk that could sicken you. It loves to eat swarms with its long tongue. It deals extra damage to them. And
it could be a good friend to have if you're dealing with swarms.
Yep. Unfortunately, the swarm may have resistance to bludgeoning damage, but fortunately, it ignores that resistance and it deals extra damage. And it can roll up into a ball where all it can do is shoot musk out and try to stand up. And it's blind. But it gains resistance 10 to all physical damage.
Which is quite intense for a level 4 creature.
And you take 1d6 slashing damage when you attack it. That's called its go away move.
Leave me alone. I just want to eat swarms.
Yep.
You're not swarm.
It's also technically prone when it rolls into a ball, so it's even easier to hit it. It has 10 resistance. It's pangolins. They love to live in the jungles of the Mwangi Expanse and Vudra. And the Taralu dwarves of Mwangi jungles like them as kindred spirits because of their scales. Because the Taralu dwarves are the ones who really like dragons. So like, well, pangolins must be blessed by dragons because look at those scales that they have.
Legit.
Yeah, it could happen. For sure. Alright.
What about Penangolin?
Penangolin? Well, that's different than pangolin.
A lot less friendly for sure. Oh gosh, that art.
Yeah, Penangolin are a type of Tangal, which is a type of creature that kind of includes a lot of those different creatures from the general, like, a lot of the Pacific Islands have some kind of creature that separates out parts of itself, of which the Penangolin is one, where, like, the head and entrails come out of the body, and it uses vinegar to make sure it kind of fits in there.
There's also the Menanangal and the Balan.
Yes, the Menanangal splits for the waist, and the Balan splits from the neck, but leave illusion-draped bananas in coffin to resemble the corpses they steal. Which is, like, I guess that could work. But there's a lot of different Tangal, and the Penangolin is one of the Tangal of the Penangolin. So, yeah, basically they, by day, they just look like anybody else. But, at some point when they can get away with it, which doesn't have to be night, but that's just the sneakiest time of day when other people are not watching, they can separate out their head and entrails and go.
And one really interesting thing about them is that, like, despite when you look at this picture, you would probably guess like that's an undead, right? No, it's actually a living aberration.
Yep.
So they have youth for as long as they live, but they're still mortal aberrations.
They have slashing weakness, and when they take slashing damage, their wound spews bile on adjacent creatures, dealing poison damage. They also lose their ability and all of their bile abilities until the end of their next turn because of all the bile coming out. They attack with their proboscis tongue, which has bile. Except for if you spelled the bile out. And their entrails they attack with and grab you with their entrails and constrict. They can elongate their tongue out to a longer reach, which also can basically give them extra reach and make you flat-footed unless you have a very high perception DC, apparently, or can precisely sense invisible things. Because the tongue becomes translucent at that point. And Penangolin bile basically makes you drained, and then you die. And they can ride around in their body. They use vinegar. It helps. It helps them. Alright. So, what about Peri? Well, Peri is a type of celestial that are very fiery, and Saren Ray likes them, but some of them also like Atreya, the Lambent King, the
they
imprisoned
don't
elemental
serve or worship
lord
gods.
of fire. Yep.
But some of them consider themselves
Sarenrae likes
yes.
them. And the imprisoned Lord of Fire likes them. But yeah, they're friends. They're friends. They're liked, but they're not like a servitor. They just do their own thing and involves fire.
A lot of fire.
Giant
burning wings.
Fire aura.
Fire aura.
See-through smoke. Fiery wing attack that deals all fire. Scimitar with fire.
Transport from flame to flame. A flame heart weapon that makes all of their weapons greater flaming, greater striking weapons. A flame wing buffet.
It's a buffet. But I think that someone who's a parry probably has set up.
You're right. It is a buffet.
Somewhere in Elysium, they just have a store that's called the Flame Wing Buffet.
Yeah, no.
That like a parry runs. That's like, all right, get your Flame Wing Buffet. We've got Phoenix wings. That's right, Phoenix wings. We cook them and then they come back to life.
Oh my goodness.
Step right up to the Flame Wing Buffet where everyone eats. And then we've also got a Wildfire Storm, which is actually the Wildfire Storm is freaking terrifying. I'm not even sure it isn't a typo that they do 15d6 damage for one action, but they do 15d6 damage for one action. All right.
What about phantoms?
Phantoms. Well, Linda, phantoms are a type of creature that is very strongly related to Eidolons. In fact, they can often be a summoner's Eidolon for an occult summoner. They're souls that were headed to the afterlife, but kind of didn't make it there. But they also did not get pulled by negative energy and corrupted and twisted into an undead, but they're at strong risk of doing so. Usually due to some kind of a tie with the material world that was going to drag them back, and then negative energy was going to get into the mix. And so, if they're phantoms now, they could be undead very soon. But if they are connected to a summoner, that kind of protects them as like a kind of a tether.
Mm-hmm. And many of them do eventually want to make their way back to the River of Souls so they don't become undead.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And so, phantoms are these, if they aren't tethered, they're wispy and incorporeal, and they are at risk of becoming like a ghost. If they get a tether with a physical being, then that automatically gives them a body that like kind of looks translucent but is physical, and that prevents them from becoming undead pretty much completely during the time that they're tethered up. And so a Phantom Knight is just kind of like, you know, a knight who's like, no, my dedication has caused me to be stuck to my lifelong mission. Kind of like Onair, the Phantom of the iconic spiritualist from PF1, Astra. And so Phantom Knight, phantoms have walk the ethereal line when they are incorporeal, not untethered phantoms, where they're like kind of in between the two planes. They're susceptible to death when their hit points are reduced to 0 as a result of a death effect. They can be whisked away to the River of Souls, and then they can attack with their phantom attacks. But phantom beasts are more interesting because weird beasts and creatures from other worlds and whatever they are can also become phantoms. They're not all just like, oh, this is that knight I saw growing up. They can be any kind of weird thing. And
from any world, yeah.
Yes. And that's what the phantom beast is, just this weird thing with like almost human-like hands for its feet. And it has a lot of the abilities of the Phantom Knight, but it can also grab things with its feet and has some weird occult special abilities because that's probably what that beast could always do.
So it's just showing that the Phantom category can be used for really anything.
That's right.
and including a way to introduce things from other worlds that your PCs would otherwise have no way to interact with.
Let's move on to Planar Scions.
Yes.
Yes. With Planar Scions. So, we've got the Aphorite and the Gonzi in here. They are the Planar Scions of Law and Chaos.
Yes.
So, Aphorites have their own sort of distinct history, kind of like Duskwalkers, where it's like not just, oh, you could be from anything that involves law, but there's like a very specific thing where the denizens of Axis forged the Aphorites in order to serve as emissaries that would be like, we're all law and math, and not everyone understands math. And so we kind of need something that kind of is mostly math, but also is not all math, so that we can kind of act as an interlocutor.
Yeah, it can understand all these different creatures of the material plane.
Yep. And so they're an ancestry, or not an ancestry, a versatile heritage, right? Yep. They're a versatile heritage. And so there's also an example Aphorite, which is like probably on the list of the top 20 Aphorites that you usually need in your campaign. It is not on that list. But it's super interesting because of the fact that it is so completely like off the wall compared to the kind of stereotypical Aphorites. It's not at all. It's a Aphorite.
It's also using Abadar's favorite weapon.
It totally is. But it's an Aphorite who uses flamboyance to kind of try to play down the idea of being an Aphorite, so that people don't think about it too much. And so, it does have a lot of Aphorite abilities like Crystalline Dust, and Calculated Reload is very Aphorite-like, and its True Strike is for the Aphorite, but, like, its personality and its outrageous hat and its hurtful critique ability of sarcastic advice are all kind of trying to, like, hide its Aphorite nature, which can cause people to underestimate it, or just otherwise maybe help it to blend in or at least stick out in a different way. Which makes it a very interesting Aphorite to kind of deal with and come up with, if maybe not like the thing that you would be like, I need to throw an Aphorite opponent so that my PCs learn about Aphorites. This is the one.
Yeah.
But Aphorites are just super easy to add it to, like, just throw any human enemy from the Game Mastery Guide and give it a few Aphorite stuff. So this really gives you a unique perspective. So Gonzi, on the other hand, they're made of primeval chaos. Gonzi can, like, have pieces of different kinds of... They aren't always even just from one type of chaotic monitor family. They can have more than one, or none. You never know what you're going to get with Gonzi.
Yeah.
And so, you've got this Gonzi martial artist that uses a style of, like, acrobatic kick, kind of kickboxing martial artist techniques that
with flurry of kicks and
yes, it reminds me a lot of capoeira, the Brazilian martial art, like what it's doing there, and it can do a flurry of kicks and do a hand spring kick where it steps and then attacks.
And she's also got a I also like her Divine Innate spells, where you use a d12 to determine 2 of those spells randomly each day.
Well, you remember that was on the list of Gonzi feats when we were going through our Best reactions of Lost Omens Ancestry Guide.
But I like that she's got that.
And she has resistance chosen randomly each day as well.
If you're a Gonzi, you learn to live with the fact that things are going to be shifting and changing.
Yeah, you're a Gonzi, you go Gonzo. That's just how it goes. And considering Warlock says that the stance looks like Muay Thai in the picture, that's also true. That's true. The description of it, of what they actually are doing, and some of the moves like handspring kicks and just like having her hands on the ground and then kicking things around, also also remind me of capoeira. Like, I think it's not, obviously it's not any one particular style from the real world. In fact, it's chaotic Ganji martial arts, so
it could be.
But it even does say that the Ganjis of Arcadia are particularly famous for the dance-like style, which emphasizes fluid motion over rigid positioning, and commonly employs kicks and sweeping leg strikes. All right, so next on our list are the Popobawas. That's right. They're evil, very powerful level 15 shape changers that feed on negative emotions. So, you know, they love it when people are all stressed out and in a bad situation. And they come from Swahili mythology. So, Popobawas, they're very vain. They're very dangerous. They smell horrible. They're one of the many, like, different, like, cyclopsy flying-ish things that are in different kind of myths and folklore.
So they feed on they feed on sorrow. So they regain hit points for every enemy that is within their range that has any variety of negative, terrible conditions.
Because those people are suffering.
Yeah, they've got a range of occult spells such as at will clairaudience and at will clairvoyance.
How else are they gonna figure out if someone's suffering?
Yep.
And ventriloquism. They can be like, "Are you suffering yet?"
Well, if they move an object with Mage Hand or Telekinetic Call, control creatures, cast Animated Assault, all sorts of things, they can use Ghost Sound or Ventriloquism as a free action to make it seem like that creature is making some sort of sound.
Have the dominating person or the object be like someone's doll be like, "I've always hated you and your mother doesn't love you," or something.
Yes.
And they have a shameful loathing ability where if they bite you, then you are inflicted with shame and self-hatred, which is great for them, but the best part is you also become stupefied, which is one of the conditions that gives them some nice noms. So, yes. And potentially doomed.
You don't want to critically fail. Well, you generally don't want to critically fail anyway.
Like, honestly, they have a lot of different abilities for stories, but really, they don't have, like, that much that screams out, like, oh man, this has to be level 15, but it's sort of the ensemble on the fact that you know you're not going to be fighting it straight out. It's going to be using ventriloquism and ghost sounds and coming at you from who knows where. Alright, so what about porcupines?
It's a giant porcupine!
Sometimes called a quill pig.
We're back to cute again. I like how it vacillates between, like, horrifying and cute.
They have passive points where if you hit them, then you might take spike damage. You probably will. And they can bed quills in you, and they rearward rush where they kind of scuttle backwards with their quills extended to hit you with the quills on their back.
And you're flat-footed against the strike unless you've seen it do that before, because what the heck, why is it rushing backwards?
Yeah, did you think it was going to back up on you? Like, that's not what most creatures do.
He looks offended to be called cute.
That's right.
Says Kasei Warlock. It's just got puffy cheeks.
Alright, speaking of things with quills on their back that start with P and are adjacent to each other, Pukwudgie.
Much less friendly.
An evil fae known as Pukwudgie, or other things in other places.
Yes, they have defensive quills.
They sure do have that.
And those quills are poisonous.
It's said that in ancient times when they first showed up in the material plane, that they actually were either less evil or were just like, their thing is respect or else. And they when they showed up, they were like to mortals, "Hey, let's be friends." And then mortals gave small potential slights because they didn't understand exactly how to show respect to Pukwudgies, and Pukwudgies murderized them and just want to kill and resent mortals and the gods who are in favor of them. Because how can the gods be in favor of someone who's so rude?
Yeah.
Ugh. So they either play cruel jokes or, kidnap and kill you and turn you into an undead.
And they've got hallucinatory terrain and Wall of Thorns. When you're fighting against one of them, like, the battlefield is going to be... They'll mess up the battlefield so they can shoot you with their poisonous bows. They've
got poisons. It can confuse you and stupefy you. It's not good. And their defensive quill can also potentially poison you if you're really bad against it. They've got invisibility at will on themselves.
And they can change shape to a giant porcupine, and it's pretty convenient because you only have to flip back one page in the bestiary to see what that looks like.
That's right. Unfortunately, it's not on the same spread. That could have been even easier, where you didn't have to flip at all. But they're on sort of the same page, just the front and the back, so you could be like, flip.
It looks like that
It turned into this other thing on the face, on the other page, on the other side of the page. Pukwudgie knows its true forms on that side. Alright. So, there's also Quintessivore.
Who eat quintessence, which you could probably guess from their name.
That's right. Where quintessence is pretty much spiritual essence that's been congealed into a physical form.
So it could be soul, and also it also is the substance of most of the planes of the outer sphere.
Yes, because of the fact that the outer sphere are actually built out of spiritual and not material essence for the most part. Like the elemental planes are all material essence, but the outer sphere are built out of this congealed, solidified spiritual essence called quintessence. And there's a sidebar about it there. So quintessivores are the ones who know that everybody's got a soul, and if you're a quintessivore and you know how to kind of take the soul and deconstruct it and turn it into physical quintessence, you could then eat it.
Yeah.
And it's delicious. But you've got to have that refined quintessivore palette. So they can, as a reaction, when something goes to 0 hit points, suspend its soul, which kind of stops it from dying for a while, because they need some time to feed on their quintessence.
But it also means that, it also stops them from increasing their hit points unless they succeed. And then they can try to save again if they would be healed. But yeah, it makes it hard to heal people.
Yep.
They've decided this
they can drain you with their attacks, and then they basically are going to eat your soul and turn it into quintessence and consume it. So every hour, they're going to keep doing that, and they're going to get some bonuses.
And some extra spells.
Extra spells from that, and deconstructing your soul can put your unique properties into its blade leg. I mean, who wouldn't want to have their unique properties in a quintessivore's blade leg? Quintessivores think.
Yeah, they think.
Yeah.
They are incorrect.
Maybe not. And then they have a bunch of spells, too. So, they're just a pretty dangerous fellow.
And they also can reactively use their suspend soul.
Or creature. Yes, they do it reactively when something comes to 0, even if they are not... no, they have to be the one that reduces it to 0, and they're like, wait, time out, I don't want to kill your friend, I just want to, deconstruct their entire soul into quintessence early,
Yeah.
That's what was gonna happen to them eventually in the outer sphere anyway. They become a petitioner, and then they break down into quintessence, and then they build the outer sphere.
I just accelerate the process, and I get tasty knobs.
And they're going on my leg instead of in some rando woodland in Nirvana or something, right? I mean, it's pretty equivalent.
Yep.
Okay. So, also, there's Rakshasa.
Yes.
And also Rakshasa.
But these are not Sharkshasa.
They aren't.
They're not.
So, seen here for the first time, like, not in the middle of turning into a dagger or something. Raktavarna. A miasma-covered snake creature that can turn into an object and therefore spy on things.
They often serve mortal conjurers.
Or more powerful Rakshasas.
And plot to overthrow.
They can spend 10 minutes to declare that someone is their master, which will allow that creature to spend a 3-action activity to observe through the Raktavarna's eyes. And Raktavarnas also have venom. So Rakshasas are basically fiends that live in the material world, and they reincarnate after their death. And depending on how well they did last time, they can get a more powerful or weaker form. Or even fail to reincarnate. And that's kind of their deal. So Raktavarna are the least Rakshasas, and then we have the greatest of all Rakshasas, Maharajas. They are reincarnated to the greatest, highest form. They've got all these heads up there. They're just like, I got a lot of heads. I'm really awesome. I'm a Maharaja Rakshasa. So Maharajas have not only the ability to reflect spells. When you use a spell, the Maharaja knows. They're just like, yeah, no, and also I reflected it at you.
They have a massive amount of occult spontaneous spellcasting, including Fabricated Truth.
That's correct, which is a 10th level spell. Their saves against divine magic are very high. They have all-around vision because they just have a lot of heads. They can falchion attack you. They can bite you with one of their many heads. They've got occult innate spells, as if their occult spontaneous spells weren't enough, like Dominate.
So they can at-will clairaudience, clairvoyance, and mind reading. The 10th level Dominate.
Terrifyingly, once per round as a free action, like, a bunch of its other heads just cast one of its spells on its foe's turn. Like, one of its 8th level 2 action or fewer spells. Like, that's horrific.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, but also you were amazed. On your turn. So you thought you got to your turn, but actually you were in a maze. It's okay.
You were in my extra bonus turn.
It's okay. It was a free action. It's okay. And then 4 Fanged Assault is one action where it makes 4 Fang Strikes with all of the non-human heads, each against a different target. They count as one attack for its multiple attack penalty.
And they can also disguise themselves as any medium humanoid.
Yep. Now, like, granted, okay, legitimately, its Fang attack is not a very good attack for a level 20 creature. It's actually pretty lousy. But for one action, it can attack 4 times, and that only reduces its map by 1 attack.
Yep.
And it is agile, so it could theoretically attack 12 times with this really crappy attack.
But it's probably going to keep
and then cast an 8th level spell as a free action later. But it's probably going to do its high level spells and then maybe 1 4-Fanged Assault or a Falchion attack and then cast an 8th level spell. So you never know what it's going to do. It's not going to be pretty. Alright. So, next after that is Ram. That's right.
Ringhorn Rams and Rosethorn Rams.
Random
for all
access
the
memory.
Ram-based alliteration.
Alright, that's right. But Mindspin Rams are another name for Rosethorn Rams because they've been found in the Mindspin Mountain. But the Ringhorn Rams have curving spiral rings on their horns. And they're rams, so of course they can move through difficult terrain and narrow ledges.
And they charge.
They love to charge you. That's what they do. That's their situation. And the Rosethorn Rams, which are pictured here, kind of have these twisted horns with these little thorns growing out of them. That's why they're called Rosethorn Rams. And they are still medium like Ringhorn Rams, but they're just even hardier. Like, they are seriously strong enough that, like, if you put out, like, a trained soldier, like a first-level fighter, who, you know, not a veteran, but still trained, they would be like, yeah, you're probably gonna lose to the Rosethorn Ram.
And they can break those thorns off inside the bodies of those they charge to deal persistent bleed damage.
That is absolutely one of their favorite activities, other than charging you with Ram Charge. Alright, speaking of which... Rancorous Priesthood. In this case, of Ravagug, but it can be anyone. It doesn't have to be Ravagug. You could choose what you want to do. It's a bunch of, like, evil and, in this case, very rancorous and just full of, like, manic energy priesthood that are going to be attacking you.
So but this also shows how you could do, troops of other, priests of other deities as well, by switching out what spells they have and maintaining sort of that spell casting.
That's right, and it shows that what you do is you use heightened versions of lower level spells to indicate that it's like, yeah, this is heightened to 5th Burning Hands because, like, all 5 people cast Burning Hands together, and so it does 5 times as much damage, or whatever. They can do a Blight Ritual without secondary casters because there's so many of them. They're so rancorous.
Yes.
And they move around, and in this case, they use Great Axes because it's Ravagug, but you can just switch the weapon and then change the damage profile to do about the same amount of damage anyway. And it's a wild swing. They just wildly swing around their weapons because they're so rancorous and wild. And that is the rancorous priest. They kind of like usually found in remote cave complexes or abandoned ruins, but also
for the Ravagug ones.
For the Ravagug ones. Also, just sometimes if you decide, oh look, there's a giant evil temple, or secret hidden temple of Ravagug, let's burn them out, and then suddenly a mob of Ravagug's faithful emerge to kill you too. It's like, no, yeah, you got us. You got us. We're not gonna try to save ourselves and scatter. We're gonna stick together and kill you too.
Yes. So it's a good way to represent a large group of lower level clerics or similar followers of a deity.
All right. There's also Ruchalik.
Yes.
They are scouts for the deep space conquerors known as the Dominion of the Black.
Thoughts and emotions.
They don't just eat thoughts and emotions, Linda. Many creatures just eat. They're connoisseurs. They're gourmets of thoughts. Each emotion has a distinctive flavor. They could get along and explain things to night gods, too, about, like, which of them has a more refined palate.
They like to cause terror and pain, and so they have abilities that
but
allow
it
them
doesn't,
to do that.
It doesn't harm the food source to cause terror and pain, it says. And they can repeatedly dine upon their favored minds, unlike night gods. So, that causes them to want to keep you around as a friend. They're a small little aberration that loves to do horrible things to you. Sometimes with over-leveled mind probes and modified memory. And they don't have to breathe because they're scouts for space. They have an enzyme that can cause you massive pain. And they can project terror into you when they're in your mind that causes nightmares.
They can copy your consciousness and then transmit it.
That's how they act as a scout. They're just like, hold your horses here. I'm just copying your entire consciousness. And we're going to send it to the spammers out there in the Dominion of the Black.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can send targeted spearfishing spam to you. And they'll have your scrying ball's number. And they'll just be like, why am I getting a call from 3 galaxies away again? Hello, would you like to purchase a timeshare in the Dark Tapestry?
No.
But I heard that you really like pangolins. How do you know that? It was from your 7th birthday when you saw a pangolin. Did you copy my consciousness? No. Yes. Is that... I'm hanging up. Don't call this scrying ball again.
Even if you changed your number, I'm still... you can't change your number because I have copied your consciousness.
That's
right. I can find you in any scrying ball.
It's like, wait, how did you find me? Well, I just thought, since I have your consciousness from before, if I were you, what would I change my scrying ball's password to? And I realized it would be your dog, Fluffles. So I just put Fluffles 954, which is your favorite number sequence. Damn it! Ruchalik and Dominion of the Black.
You rascal.
Constantly invading my privacy by sending my consciousness into outer space again. Oh, that's not the worst of it. The great old ones were tapping the line. They got a copy of your consciousness too, and they sent it to your ex. Why did they do that? I don't know. Ask Nyarlathotep or whatever he's calling himself these days. Okay, so, Roiling Incants. Roiling Incants are kind of cool. Look at their traits.
Uncommon, neutral, large, arcane, evocation, mindless. They don't have, like, a creature type one.
Their creature type is arcane evocation.
Yes.
That is because what they are is a bunch of magic. They are not an ooze made out of magic. They're not an aberration made out of magic. They're not magic. A beast made out of magic. They are a bunch of magic that has gained not really an intellect because they're mindless, but like some kind of identity that is mindless and just is going to go out there. It comes from magical accidents and it's going to do its magic.
And as it says in the in its unstable magic ability, they're as much a massive unstable magic as they are a creature.
Yep, they just are. So
they can't heal, but they naturally recover.
Yep, the one that's in this example is an evocation one because that's the most straightforward, right? So it's like this is evocation energy. You do not want to try to burn it with a fireball because you have just tried to burn evocation energy with evocation energy.
Yes.
All that you're going to be doing
is healing them.
Yes. That's it. That's all you're going to do is heal them with if you throw evocation energy.
But they do damage themselves when they cast their non-cantrip spells because they're pulling away from their magic, which is themselves.
Yep. Absolutely. And so it's just made of evocation energy. So that's just what's going to happen. And it can hit you with force tendrils, it can hit you with force bolts, but what it like casting its spells, but that absolutely harms it because it's used some of its magic. And it can engulf you with magic. So that's kind of the situation. It's usually created by accident. Though some like very evil spellcasters have attempted to create it on purpose, but they have not figured out how. It kind of attacks everything because it's just like they're usually made out of attack spells or destructive spells, and so it's like, well, someone cast me to burn things down. I guess I'm gonna burn everything.
I mean, they're mindless too, so it's
they
just
don't
like
have
they're
mindless. It's just like it's just that that's what they were created for. It's like someone cast fireball and was like, burn this, and then somehow it's a roiling incantation. It's just like burn this, burn this, burn this. That's all it can do. So, speaking of things that are not the same as that, Rokuro Kubi.
Yes.
Mortals that were cursed by some misdeed, or sometimes even it was somebody else's fault, which could be very annoying. In some of the original Japanese folklore, it would be just like, this person did this jerk thing, and one of their relatives turned into a Rokuro Kubi because whatever. So you know their neck kind of lengthens. And they might do mischief, and they love guzzling oil. Oil is
and
there's
only a brief period of time when people could be still saved from the curse.
Yep. I mean, even the curse doesn't turn you into a completely evil creature, other than a nefarious few of them that are pretty evil. But they're still neutral, but they do these mischief. And they guzzle down oil. They even have a reaction, drink oil, where if you try to use our chemical bombs on them, then it will try to catch it in its mouth.
Drink it.
It heal. It's like, oh, thank you very much. That's delicious. It can use attacks of opportunity. It can extend out its neck to it's already 10 feet long in its Rokuro Kubi form, but it can go up to 20 feet for a turn. And it can do a threatening lunge, where it threateningly lunges and demoralizes you.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, living heal spells that loose out an undead horde.
There's also Sabo-san. Because we have actually just a lot of bat creatures in this bestiary. Too many of them are just like, this is an evil flying bat, and this is one of those. But we also do have Nyctera.
Yes.
So Sabo-sans they're different from Grioth, because Grioth are priests of all the Oths. If you end in Oth, Grioth are your fan. They're squeeing over you. But Sabo-sans...
They venerate the slain demon lord of shadows.
Viriavaxis, who was killed by Nocticula.
And the nearly forgotten sun god, Ysvira.
Yes. That's right. So, they have connections to some of those deities that are connected to that artifact that was in one of our Linda's Adventures episodes. So... they're neutral evil, and they have echolocation, as you expect from kind of vampire bat type thing, plus persistent bleed on their bite from the anticoagulant. They drain your blood. They have a fell shriek that can deafen you for a minute. I'm not necessarily sure that it's worth it to use that fell shriek, but it can be a strategy involving deafening you and then trying to do something that will block out sight, and then you don't have vision or hearing.
Well, because they have echolocation, so if they
do.
Yeah.
They do.
So if they have a way to get rid of your sight, and then they deafen you, and then they're
potentially. If they're in a group, they might have a strategy. But
yeah.
2 actions is pretty steep for just deafening you.
One alone probably wouldn't use that ability.
I think. If it was a solo, I would probably use my powerful charge and move double speed and make a claw attack.
And if you move extra, then you
deal extra damage. Mm-hmm. Pretty handy. Yep, and so Sabasan had a kingdom once long ago in the heart of the jungle, but the Gorilla King destroyed it, or some unknown force drove them out.
And now that they've been driven out, they're looking for a new home, and
it could be your home.
It could have been your home that they decided to take as their new home.
All right. So speaking of friendly creatures that just enjoy the company of anyone,
Sawkeels. Not friendly.
See, look at the sidebar says check with friends.
Well, that's because that's a content warning sidebar.
It's not because of how friendly they are?
No, it's checking with your friends to make sure that they're going to be comfortable with what you're doing with Sawkeels, because they relish in fear and trauma.
Yes. Sawkeels are basically fallen psychopomps that are just like, look, the multiverse is going to end someday. Why are we doing this cycle? It's pointless. So they like the rebellious teenage phase against Pharasma, except for they take it to the extreme where they're just like, okay, we're going to become our own fiend now. We're not a monitor. We're going to the ethereal plane, and we're just going to revel in the ultimate absurdity of life and the universe by causing horrific fear and psychological trauma to mortals, and feeling, because we feel that. It's a big thing. We can better to rule in this anxiety-ridden catastrophe than to serve this metaphysical cycle. That's kind of their deal. So they became neutral evil fiends, and they each embody like a certain type of fear, anxiety, or other like serious problem that causes mortals to just kind of get too anxiety-ridden to even do anything or accomplish or achieve things.
So, Esapil represent sort of the fear among people who live with animals, that those animals could turn on them.
It's the same thing that leads to the tales of your pet cat might steal your breath while you're asleep, or actually go over your mouth and suffocate you. It's just the vague idea. Or if someone has a really big dog and you think at a moment, it's like, I know this dog is gentle, but if it wanted to, it could kill everyone in this room before we could stop it. All of those kind of things are the things that make up an Esapil. And so they like to ingratiate themselves with mortals and then bide their time to strike, because that's kind of their thing. It's like,
they can turn themselves into a tiny cat, dog, or other just unassuming domestic animal, and then...
They're also super easy to call with planar binding, but they're always free to attack or leave instead of negotiate unless you get a critical success.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just an Esapil. You called me up. No, yeah, it's easy. I'll help you out. I'm actually gonna kill you. And they can do some evil damage and grab you. They've got fear. They've got 3rd level fear on a 1st level creature, which is pretty intense.
Yeah.
It's more than a little intense. It's really nasty. It's probably, really cruel to make people fight a bunch of these that all have 3rd level fear. As 1st level, it's it's just a 1st level Sawkeel. But they don't often necessarily hunt in giant groups anyway.
Yeah.
And, like many other Sawkeel, they can skip between the ethereal plane, which, for a 1st level creature, is going to be a lot of problems getting to it if it's on the ethereal plane. Fortunately, it can't do much to you there either. So then there's Nucol.
The fear of parasites and affliction.
That's right. So they appear as disease-ridden boars. It's all of like the fear. There could be parasites in this water. There could be microbes anywhere. We have to bleach down every surface.
So they offer to remove their afflictions that they inflict for a price.
Yep.
But usually
they want to make you give up the things you love or the things you care about most in your life. But yes, they can inflict you with diseases, and they can remove the disease if they want, but they could always reinfect you later. So you need to figure out what you're going to do about that. They have the nervous consumption disease, which is actually mental in addition to being a disease. So it's like kind of psychosomatic too. They've got fear. They can skip between. They can spray pus on you. They love spraying pus on you.
They're just gross, awful
It's
things.
just like kind of a fun thing that they can do. It's a pus attack, and like some of them, like the one in PF1, like do it with a sneeze of mucus. It's just like it's kind of awful. All right, so next after that is going to be Wissax, gaunt and insectile Sakiels that are focused on fear of like a spider crawling on your body.
Yeah, and infestations.
Yes. Or, are there cockroaches? Are they in the walls? How many are there? Could they just come out at me? That's a Wissac. And so, they are also easy to call. They are swarm walkers, so they kind of just like move into swarms.
Leave them alone, too.
The unintelligent ones, anyway.
Yeah.
Tend to leave them alone, and they don't take damage from them. The -5 int ones. Once you're up to even -4, like a rat swarm, they might still attack them. They've got their evil attacks. They can suggestion, vomit out swarms. They can do a droning distraction where they confuse and stupefy you. Numb your mind with buzzing drones. So Sakiel, obviously Psychopomps hate them because Sakiels have gone rogue. And but the kind of celestial that really opposes their philosophy are Quaddles, because Quaddles are trying to inspire mortals and bring out like positive emotions and things in them so they can do more. And Sakiels are trying to bring out negative emotions so that they and just
make
people do
feel
less
hopeless,
and so that the Sakiels can just kind of lord over it and feel that they created this negative emotion. So they often kind of are at odds with each other in that way.
Pakalti are the Sakiels that have to do with relationships. And
it's like, do they really like me? It's like,
do they secretly hate me? Does this person have it out for me?
Or just like any little thing you see is like, oh, are they, it's like, is this person falling out of love with me? Or like, is our relationship breaking down? Is that what this means? Is this a sign that it's just over?
Yeah. Any sort of insecurity or about relationships.
Yep. And they stretch this out over long periods of time. And they also have thorns and vines that entangle you as a reaction. They can cause you to take a massive penalty to speed when you move adjacent to the Pakalki. There's no way around it. It's just like, no, you moved adjacent, take a little bit of damage, and a massive penalty to all your speeds.
Yep.
Fortunately, like, the fact that you moved adjacent to the Pakalki probably means that you are where you wanted to be, I guess. Which is, like, in melee with the Pakalki, but it lasts until the end of your next turn, the penalty.
Yes.
So if the Pakalki moves away, you're going to have trouble chasing it.
Their poison is a betrayal toxin, which in addition to stupefying, makes you not be able to treat any creature as your ally.
Because of the whispers of doubt. It's like, are they really my ally? Are they actually going to betray me? And they've also got a ridiculous level 7 Mask of Terror on a level 9 creature. Self only. Level 6 Dominate. They've got a lot, and it's very nasty. They can shoot out thorns with bleeding, and the toxin, everything is bad when you've got a Pakalki. Now sock heals like divs because kind of divs want to corrupt and destroy anything mortals make because of their from the angry genies. And Sockles are like, yeah, we don't care about that, but ultimately the fact that we're giving them horrible anxiety and they don't do anything is something you probably like because they're not making anything, right? And the divs are like, yeah, we can respect that. And the Velstrax are like, but what about torture and pain and doing the worst possible thing and transforming into like a pained, horrible being? And the Sockles are like, we can appreciate psychological torture versus torture, but we're just kind of trying to wreck them into like indolent blobs and not necessarily make them into these torture pain things. But you know what? You're our people. And daemons are just like, whatever, we'll destroy all existence.
Well, they can tolerate them.
Yeah, but they see them more as like internet trolls. Kind of the fiend thing. It's like, we're destroying all existence and you're just hanging out in a palace on the ethereal plane doing like, boo, spooky. Please. They see them as like kind of infantile provocateurs. Which is kind of funny. So then we move on to Zimtal Sakil. So Zimtals are all about loneliness and the anxiety that accompanies it. Like, so it's like the insecurity of yourself, isolation. It's like, am I good enough? Does anyone like me? People get isolated out. It's like no one wants to be around me. Those kind of isolation. And so, therefore, Zimtal have some pretty horrific abilities, including isolate foes, which once per day attempts to isolate its enemy's companions, forcing an impression that each creature's friends and allies have vanished, and they are alone against the Zimtal. So up to 4 creatures become out of phase with their allies, and it's not just mental. They are literally out of phase. They can even move into their ally spaces if the allies simply were not there. And until a remove curse or every day you can try to get your allies back, they're just not there.
Their attacks have a sensory fever, which deletes senses.
Yep, that's another thing about the isolation.
Yeah,
is like the fear
of getting
basically
isolated. Alone, trapped in your own mind with no one else.
Yes, trapped in your own mind, no one's there. You eventually lose all of your senses, and it becomes permanent, and you're just trapped. Aren't they lovely? They also have a despoiler aura.
A 1,000-foot aura.
It's 1,000 feet.
Yes.
-2 saves against poison, disease, and drugs. Enjoy! They can also send you into a maze.
Yeah.
3 times. And 3 horde wiltings.
At will fear, yep.
At will fear. It's level 8.
Yeah. The Kimmit represent the fear of failure. And inadequacy.
The inadequacy, failure, self-loathing, it's like the stereotypical depressive anxiety that is one of the most dangerous ones towards like depression and suicide in real life. And it's that voice in your head that tells you you're worthless and that's constantly saying that everything you do isn't good enough, or that's cynically pointing out, oh, people are just being nice when they're laughing at that. Or when they seem to be enjoying that, but they don't really. Nothing you do is ever good enough. Nobody likes you. In fact, when I say they're that voice in your head, I mean literally, because their eternal fear ability allows them to not only frighten you, but also lodge themselves in your mind for a year, where they can telepathically communicate with you for 1 minute each day to spend time saying horrible things to you. And
they have a lot of ways
it's
to
also permanent in a critical failure.
Because they've also got their frightening flurry.
Yep, they feed on fear. They have attack of opportunity, but only on creatures with fear. But they hit you twice instead of once. Actually, they can do it once, but not if you're not feared. They can't do it twice. They've got powerful magic. They have frightening flurry, where they can do jaw and then 2 claws.
They've got rend.
And that's even worse because it makes them frightened with a condition value equal to the number of strikes that hit. So you could become frightened.
They've also got at-will 9th level Dispel Magic, so
they sure do.
For ripping down magic.
They rip down everything that you thought could protect you. It's like they're gonna tear you down.
They have at-will Fear and Mask of Terror and Suggestion.
You also become Stupefied 3 when you get hit by any of their mental effects, and for 1d4 rounds
and
thereafter.
And there's no save on that, so.
It's when you're affected.
Yes.
So if they hit you with Fear, and you're like, oh, I succeeded. Okay, I'm frightened 1. I'm also Stupefied 3, though. You were affected.
It talks a bit about their Xibalba, the realm in the ethereal plane.
That's right.
The Land of Dread.
Their demi-plane home within the ethereal plane. At the center is a black pyramid where the tormentors of the Sakild rule their brethren and sow fear throughout the mortal realms.
Yeah, these guys are awful.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. I mean, like, not in the sense that they're a bad creature, but, like, in the sense that they're evil.
Yep. Why don't we move on to the next spread? Then?
Sure. How about Samsarans?
Samsarans.
So, remember that eternal cycle that Sakils think is a joke? Samsarans are part of that cycle. They reincarnate. That is why they are Samsarans. Their ancestral home is Ziha in Tiansha. And this is a Samsaran anchorite. It's not just a Samsaran, it's an anchorite, and it's really attached to the cycle of Samsara, and it has, like, a whole bunch of complicated, like, cycle of Samsara-based abilities for that reason.
So they subconsciously retain bits of knowledge from former lives. They have reactions. All this has happened before, and all this will happen again.
Yep. Where they get a bonus on initiative, and
they fight, and when they fail or critically fail a will save, they can re-roll.
Yep.
With a bonus.
That's right. For all this will happen again. That's an anchorite. They also got a little bit of first level spells. And then there's also
a
Sasquatch. They are reclusive creatures that live in secluded areas. They are surprisingly stealthy in forests. Plus 11 for a level 2 creature is very high.
Mm-hmm. But that's their deal.
They speak their own language of Sasquatch. They can just emerge from the undergrowth as a free action, and it's very startling and could demoralize you. They throw rocks at you.
You don't have to share a language with them for them to threaten you, and they
punch you.
And they're really sneaky.
On a critical hit, they knock you down. They move fast through the woods. Yeah, they smell, and yeah, that's about what a Sasquatch does. They're not super complicated. But there's also other similarly hidden creatures like the mountain-dwelling Yetis and Orang Pendak, Yowie, Almas, and Yaren. And they have different abilities to help them remain isolated. Alright, what about
the Scale Scribe and the Seahorse?
Scale Scribes are tiny aberrations that bond to a mage over a 1-hour ritual that can allow them to kind of aid their bonded spellcaster in crafting a scroll and make their transcribed spell that's scribed onto them available to the caster, as long as the spell is of the caster's tradition, which lets prepared casters prepare spells, and bonded spellcasters can add it to their repertoire during their daily preparation from the transcribed scroll.
That's pretty convenient.
Yep, they're therefore highly sought after as assistants for wizards and other spellcasters.
They also have a transcribing reaction.
Yes. That is how they determine what they've transcribed.
Yes.
They find another creature targets them with a spell requiring verbal components. They will attempt to copy it using a counteract check, which does not actually stop or counteract the spell, but determines whether they copy it onto a scroll or not. And they have a fountain pen melee attack, as you see in their hand. And their ranged attack is a morphine glyph that does force damage. Plus they have like secret page and ink stain. When they hit you with their fountain pen, you take poison damage from the ink.
Yes.
That's just how they go.
And seahorses.
Seahorse.
This is a giant seahorse.
Yes, they're bear-sized, docile versions of their tiny cousins.
They're great at camouflage, and they can use their tail to anchor themselves in place.
Yep, absolutely. And they also attack you with their snoot and their tail.
Yes, and you can see this one's got a saddle.
Yep. It sure does. Because after all, it's a seahorse. It says baby giant seahorses are too big to easily float and lack sufficient strength to swim on their own for several weeks. So adult seahorses can carry up to 20 babies hanging from them.
They link tails with an adult and allow themselves to be ferried around.
Yep.
Ah.
Next on the list, Seething Spirit. Hatred so powerful, it lives beyond the grave. In ephemeral crimson apparitions known as Seething Spirits. They want to find a host for their rage. If you're very angry, because you are angry at a jilted lover for romantic resentment, or you're angry from persecution, it doesn't matter. They will come, they will find you, and they will possess you, which does not, like, put them in charge of the body, but puts them in there, and they sow the seeds of resentment and rage within you and alter your behavior and personality. And the host might just think, you know, they're finally just speaking out, and they're telling it like it is, but it generally eventually leads to their death.
Spirit, yes.
Yeah.
So they emanate an enraging aura.
They sure do. And that emanates out of the possessed creature, which can cause everybody, including them, to take a bunch of penalties, like if you were enraged, but get a +2 status bonus to melee damage against the spirit's enemies.
Yes.
It can taste anger and hatred from within a mile to find somebody that's an appropriate host. Tasty. Mm-hmm. It's vulnerable to calm emotions, which could potentially force it out. If it isn't possessing a creature, it will take mental damage based on calm emotions.
But it can try to possess a new creature pretty quickly if it gets shunted out.
It sure can, but it has to be an adjacent corporeal creature, and it doesn't say that it has to be one that's really angry, but it probably prefers it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it can give you paranoia and make suggestions. So that can we make a suggestion? Be angry!